In the late 1930s, old Austria, a mere operetta republic after the grand imperial collapse, found itself ensnared in the insidious webs of economic penury and a political instability that, like a noxious miasma, already poisoned the ground for the stench of authoritarianism. And so it came to pass, in the year of our Lord, 1938, that barbarity, with an unseeing, furious impetus, burst forth once more into the cultivated gardens of civilization. Nazi Germany, a biblical plague made manifest, simply annexed Austria. And upon that land, once so refined and steeped in culture, descended an unending night of shattered glass. First, as ever, came the slow, deliberate dehumanization of the other, the spittle of contempt, the hatred inoculated into every hidden crevice. Then arrived the boots, their sinister resonance echoing upon the cobbled streets, and hard upon their heels, with scarcely a breath drawn, the clubs, the stones, the devouring fire, and the righteous lead. The violins, once vibrant with the harmony of Mozart and Strauss, were silenced, one by one, until the tyranny's grim quietude covered all. The very force of evil, with its black standard unfurled, imposed itself upon the land that had once brought forth such genius. When to think or to pray in a manner distinct becomes a supreme treason against the criminal state, when hell itself with its reek of brimstone and its ululating cries knocks at your very door, the sole path to salvation is flight. Rich and poor, believers and unbelievers, all cast into the same crucible. To abandon all, the life painstakingly woven, family, friends, the memories that cling to the soul like ivy. To dare to cross the beast's very heart, to circumvent its gaping maw until a port is gained, a ship boarded, and escape achieved. No lingering, no faltering, merely to burst through the gates of that inferno, no matter the cost. One had to reach those ships, which, like specters of hope, promised to carry one far out to sea, leaving upon them firm land the cruelty that pursued you. The exorbitant price of an English visa for Barbados or Trinidad represented the toll exacted for a passage to faith, to a new life in America, far from the madness that with renewed fury was being reborn in old Europe.
We must be prepared.
I understand. We'll face whatever comes together.
And the ships waited. Two of them, the last to weigh anchor from a German port bearing Jewish passengers, a scant time before the Nazi final solution, the systematic extermination of millions, unleashed its full horror. From Hamburg, the Caribia cleaved the storm of hatred that permeated the very air, seeking the open sea, seeking the breath that only the ocean's immensity could offer. Passengers, a great many of them Jewish, mingled without distinction of class, sharing a singular fear, a sisterly sadness that constricted the breast, and a common pain that bound them together. For horror, when suffered in chorus, binds men to their very depths. I am the other, the soul whispered. The noble captain, with his Jewish wife and daughter, breathed a secret sigh of relief, masters of a concealed truth no one could fathom. Through Scapa Flow, the ship, its crew, and its passengers fled under the indifferent and craven gaze of a world that preferred to avert its eyes. Meanwhile, Chamberlain, already at death's door, Lord Halifax and the Frenchman Daladier celebrated, naive and cowardly, the paper peace Hitler had promised. To navigate the Atlantic in winter was no simple task for any aboard, be they in the velvet-lined saloons of the first class or the reeking bilges of the third class. Yet the dream of the new continent, optimistic, youthful, and vibrant, eclipsed the dread of German U-boats and the Nazi fury that simmered on the continent. A strange and vibrant harmony reigned on the ship. Passengers met, shared their tales, celebrated the birth of a child, marriages joining young and old, the forging of friendships, partnerships, dreams, and love stories. Behind the scenes, however, a silent animosity festered between the professional crew loyal to their captain and certain members who, like political commissars, had been sown there by the Gestapo. After many days of traversing the blue universe, joy erupted at the sight of Barbados. The island shimmered with the colors of faith and glints of light. But suddenly, clouds veiled the sun. Fresh orders from London revoked the visas for Barbados, and the governor, with a reluctant nod, was forced to comply, compelling the Caribia to set sail once more without a single passenger having disembarked. From London, the craven betrayal of Halifax, the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the members of the infamous Astor Group had not yet run its course. Hamburg commanded an immediate return. Disregarding the orders from Germany, the captain conferred with several passengers and resolved to steer south towards Trinidad in a desperate attempt to disembark there. Swiftly, the passengers' anguish upon learning of the new course transmuted into a palpable relief that permeated the very air. Again, the emerald sea of the Caribbean opened to embrace them with a promise of hope. After but a few days of sailing through the crystalline waters, where fish greeted them in chorus with the birds and a warm breeze kissed the decks, the port of Trinidad, a small island neighboring Venezuela, hove into view. The reception, escorted by several British warships, surprised all. In those English waters, there was no reported presence of U-boats. The authorities permitted only the captain to disembark, to whom they communicated the suspension of visas, the prohibition of resupply, disembarkation, or the use of any English port's anchorage by order of the Foreign Office, for Great Britain had signed a peace treaty with Germany. All this was accompanied by a recommendation to return to Hamburg, as no Caribbean nation wished to incite the fury of the Nazis. The captain pondered the impossibility of calling at the Dutch Antilles, given the close ties of that crown to the Berlin regime, when one of his passengers and his wife, Venezuelans returning to their homeland after a long exile, insisted he set course for Venezuela. In Venezuela, a new regime commanded by a just man with an affinity for the Jewish people, General Eleazar López Contreras, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Venezuelan Armed Forces, was opening its doors. In that beautiful tropical land on the northern coast of South America, an era of oil prosperity was dawning, and an atmosphere of peace and enthusiasm for the future reigned. It was the final destination for so many European emigrants. People from all latitudes began their new lives in a benevolent and friendly land. The Jewish community, in particular, was prosperous, free, and an active, integrated part of the local society. Yet upon receiving news of the ship's arrival, Venezuelan military officers advised the president against allowing them to dock, fearing the Nazis' wrath. Indeed, unbeknownst to the president, the naval authorities even urged the Caribia not to dock and to sail back towards Hamburg, towards a certain death. Despair spread through the ship. Despite Berlin's threats and after consulting with members of the Venezuelan Jewish community in the company of his wife, President López Contreras stood firm against the military and authorized the Caribia's immediate entry into port, ordering the authorities to welcome the suffering passengers. The Caribia, notified on the high seas, turned back. As they reached the coast of Venezuela, dusk fell under the menacing shadow of Nazi U-boats, with orders to sink them. The final minutes of the crossing were fraught with the utmost danger. The harbor of Puerto Cabello was small and lacked mooring lights. But anguish gave way to hope. In the port's waters, dozens of boats awaited them with lights, flowers, and music, welcoming them to Venezuela. Without hesitation, the entire population of Puerto Cabello mobilized, descending to the port and using the lights of trucks and cars, flashlights, headlamps, and even torches and candles, they illuminated the quay so the Caribia could dock. The ship's passengers, exhausted and still anxious from the dangers and ill surprises of the voyage, found themselves embraced by a smiling people with open arms, welcoming them as they had so many other foreigners who chose Venezuela to rebuild their lives in peace and progress. The majority of these passengers remained in Venezuela, raised families, and saw their businesses prosper in peace under the tropical sun and the flourishing nature of that almost rural Venezuela. The story of the Caribia stands as a poignant testament to the inherent goodness and courage of Venezuelans, their willingness to champion just causes, and their embrace of family, industry, and good people. Today, as over 9 million Venezuelans have been compelled to flee their homeland, escaping hunger, insecurity, and the lack of opportunities wrought by socialism, we wish to remind the world of the generosity that has always defined us, Venezuelans, and how our land of grace remains, even now, a melting pot of nationalities, creeds, and colors. All Venezuelan.